So, usually when we think about building something that actually lasts, we have this very specific expectation of what, massive infrastructure requires.
Right, like we want to see the blueprints.
Exactly. If you're engineering a skyscraper, you pour thousands of tons of concrete, you lay out this intricate steel grid, and you hire an absolute army of workers.
Yeah, and the architect basically points to it and says, there it is, that's how we survive the ages.
Right, because our default assumption is that endurance requires heavy armor. Like, we want legacies built by committees,
Yeah.
protected by physical walls and backed by the treasury of an entire empire.
We really want to see the math on it.
Yeah.
We want structural, tangible proof that a thing just cannot be knocked down.
But, and this is what we're getting into today, when you actually examine the foundational movements of Western civilization, that whole blueprint is frequently, and I mean violently, shredded.
Oh, completely torn apart.
Yeah. So today, we are doing a deep dive into an origin story that is just profoundly counterintuitive. It operates on a logic that Dale in institutional power.
It really does. It's the absolute definition of a historical paradox.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this. Because today, we're forensically examining this classic mid-century audio drama. It's an excerpted transcript of the Ave Maria Hour.
Specifically, the episode focusing on St. Benedict.
Exactly. And this was uploaded by the YouTube channel Chesterton Radio Theater, which is a great source for this kind of stuff. And our mission today isn't just to, recap an old radio play.
Right. We're not just reading a Wikipedia summary here.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
We are looking at how this specific dramatization portrays a man who fundamentally altered history. We're looking at radical isolation, spiritual warfare, and the birth of a movement that literally outlasted empires.
And we have to establish the incredible paradox at the heart of this source text right up front. Because you have a young man who looked at civilization, basically felt utter disgust, and fled into the wilderness.
He just ran away.
He ran away. But by entirely abandoning civilization, he somehow ended up laying the foundations for its survival over the next millennia.
Which is wild. And the narrative of this play doesn't really ease us into that paradox either.
No, it drops us right in. It doesn't start with a chronological biography of a boy growing up in a decaying Rome.
Right. It starts at the end, or, well, I guess the enduring present, right? It anchors you, the listener, immediately at Monte Cassino in Italy.
Which is the monastery he founded. And this framing device is so effective because it forces us to confront the sheer, almost implausible survival of this specific piece of ground.
Implausible is definitely the right word for it, because the intro-narration gives this litany of destruction that is just relentless.
It really is a target. We aren't talking about a monastery that sat quietly on a hill while history happened somewhere else.
No, it was systematically annihilated, first by the Lombards.
And let's just pause on the Lombards for a second, because that term can kind of gloss over the reality for modern listeners.
Yeah, who were they exactly?
They were a Germanic people who swept into the Italian peninsula in the 6th century. And this wasn't just a polite political transition.
Right, wasn't a treaty.
Exactly. It's a violent severing of the remaining Roman infrastructure. So when they sacked Monte Cassino, they didn't just break a few windows, they completely leveled it.
Wow.
The monks actually had to flee to Rome, and the site was left as a desolate ruin for over a century.
Over a century of complete silence on that mountain. But then, it gets rebuilt. A new generation of monks goes back up there. They reestablish the order, and it stands for a century and a half.
Which is a long time.
Yeah.
5 or 6 generations of human beings living, working, and praying there. For them, it's a permanent fixture of reality.
Right, and then the Saracens arrive.
Yeah, the Islamic expansion into southern Italy.
And that brings another wave of just total devastation.
Yeah.
It is sacked and destroyed a second time.
But the cycle just keeps going.
Yeah.
Because it's rebuilt again. And this time, it actually enters a sort of golden age.
Yeah, the narrative points out that it flourished for 9.5 centuries.
950 years.
That is mind-blowing. To put that in perspective, that is more than 3 times the current age of the United States.
It's an almost incomprehensible stretch of stability. But even nearly a millennium of deep roots couldn't protect it from, the geopolitics of the 13th century.
Right, when it suffered under German armies, and then later it was trampled by the forces of Napoleon.
Which brings us to the most visceral destruction mentioned in the broadcast.
Yeah, this part is heavy. The narrator notes that only 20 years ago, and remember, that's relative to the mid-century audience listening to this radio play, Monte Cassino was destroyed more thoroughly than ever before.
Right, in 1944. during the Second World War.
The Allies dropped over 1,400 tons of bombs on the abbey because they believed German troops were using it as an observation post.
Yeah, 1,400 tons.
It was pulverized into literal dust, like completely erased from the skyline.
And out of that radioactive dust, we get the motto of Monte Cassino, which the play highlights. Successa virescit.
Cut down, it rises again.
Exactly.
You know, I was thinking about this relentless cycle, and it kind of reminds me of a giant sequoia tree.
Oh, that's interesting. How so?
Well, certain species of sequoia actually require devastating forest fires to survive. Like, they literally need the fire. It sweeps through, burns away all the suffocating underbrush, and the intense heat is what finally causes the sequoia cones to open up and release their seeds.
So without the fire, there's no renewal.
Exactly. And Monte Cassino seems to operate on that exact same terrifying logic. It draws total devastation, but that devastation is almost a prerequisite for its complete renewal.
The sequoia analogy is a really good way to illustrate the mechanics of renewal, but,
Right.
and I'm going to push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
A tree doesn't choose the fire, right? A tree is just a victim of its environment.
That's fair, yeah.
The phenomenon we're witnessing at Monte Cassino is entirely driven by human agency and spiritual will. The destruction is imposed from the outside, sure, but the renewal is a conscious, really agonizing choice made by individuals to return to the ashes and rebuild.
Right, they have to physically walk back up that mountain and start moving stones.
Exactly. Which forces us to look at the seed itself. What kind of spiritual DNA was planted on that mountain to make people return to the rubble century after century?
To understand that, we basically have to rewind 1,400 years, or about 600 years after Christ.
Yeah, to understand the man who first stood on that ground. And as the play shows us, he didn't start his journey anywhere near a mountaintop,
No, he started in a hole in the ground.
literally hiding in a wilderness cave.
The narrative shifts us from this grand sweep of geopolitics right into the microscopic isolation of a cave.
Yeah.
We're introduced to the flight from, as he calls it, Rome and all its wickedness.
And the portrayal of Benedict here is really striking.
Yeah, there is absolutely no glowing halo.
None. There was no serene, sanitized saint. The radio play introduces him as this wild-looking, feral young man squatting among the rocks.
And he looks almost fearful when he's discovered by the older monk, Romanus, like he's a cornered animal.
But Romanus observes something crucial in that interaction. He looks past the matted hair and the rags, and he says something like, "Not a wild man of the woods. I see the trace of refinement in your face."
Right, he clocks him immediately.
He does. He realizes this isn't a barbarian who doesn't know any better. This is a highly educated, likely, wealthy Roman citizen who has deliberately thrown away his status.
Let's dig into the reality of Rome at this moment in history, roughly 500 AD. The Western Roman Empire has collapsed.
It's a mess.
The aqueducts are failing. The political system is just this violent mess of warlords and corruption. So when Benedict says he has fled Rome and its wickedness, he isn't just making a moral judgment.
Right, he's making a survival calculation. Yeah?
Exactly. He wants to be near God. So he completely unplugs from a society that he views as structurally unsalvageable.
Which prompts Romanus to ask this incredibly modern, psychologically astute question.
I love this question so much.
It's brilliant. He listens to this feral kid claim he fled the city to escape sin, and Romanus just probes him and asks, "I was just wondering if you thought sin would vanish just because you fled from it."
It is the ultimate critique of pure escapism. It's like, are you just running away from your problems, kid?
Romanus is essentially telling him, look, you can run into the deepest cave in the Italian wilderness, but you bring your own human nature with you.
The darkness isn't just in the Roman Senate. It's in the human heart. And if you're broken, you're just going to infect the cave.
But notice how Benedict responds to that in the text. He doesn't offer this naive defense of his own purity.
No, he's actually hyper-aware of his own flaws.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He knows man is born in sin. But he claims this right to solitude, to dedicate his entire life to praying for all men.
He's asserting that this intense, isolated spiritual warfare has actual utilitarian value for the rest of humanity.
Yes. And the physical toll of this philosophy, as described in the play, is just staggering. Romanus asks him how long he's been out there, and Benedict doesn't even know.
He's completely lost the concept of time. The narrative reveals it has been 3 years. 3 years living in a cave, seeing absolutely no one except Romanus, who occasionally drops food down to him on a rope.
And consider the physiology of this asceticism. When asked what he eats, Benedict says, wild roots, berries.
The caloric deficit alone is insane. You'd have massive physical wasting, lethargy, probably hallucinations.
Benedict is systematically subjugating his physical biology to his spiritual will. He claims he scarcely even thinks of food. He's attempting to basically starve out his physical desires to create room for a pure spiritual frequency.
But you cannot contain that kind of radical energy indefinitely. A light in the dark attracts attention.
It really does.
The mere extremity of his isolation creates this huge gravitational pull, so eventually wandering shepherds find him.
And the word spreads that a man of God lives in the caves.
His secret is blown, and his reputation inevitably reaches the very monastery where Romanus lives, which sets up this amazing clash of cultures.
It's a fascinating transition in the script, because we move from this desolate, freezing, existential silence of the wilderness directly into the claustrophobic friction of a bureaucracy.
We enter the monastic water cooler.
Yes. And it is so incredibly human.
It really is. You have this holy order of monks, guys who have supposedly dedicated their lives to God, but they are gossiping and politicking just like middle management in a corporate office.
The tension is palpable.
Yeah.
The narrative introduces us to Brother Peleus, who is just the perfect embodiment of an institutional immune system.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Because bureaucracies, even religious ones, naturally seek homeostasis, right? They want comfort, routine, predictability.
And when a bureaucracy encounters radical purity, like a guy starving in a cave for 3 years, it views that purity as a virus.
Exactly. It threatens their comfortable status quo.
Peleus leads this faction of monks who view Benedict's whole lifestyle with, as the script says, ironic amusement.
When he hears about Benedict sleeping on thorn bushes and eating roots, Peleus calls it presumptuous.
Peleus is basically that one coworker who is deeply, deeply annoyed by the office overachiever.
Yes. He asks, who does he think he is, that he is so worthy in the sight of God that he can intervene for other men's sins?
Which is just pure psychological projection on Peleus's part.
Completely. Peleus has theoretically given his life to God, but he's comfortable. He has a warm bed, regular meals.
So Benedict's mere existence, even miles away in a cave, is this silent indictment of Peleus's mediocrity. Peleus feels judged not by what Benedict says, but by what Benedict is willing to endure.
And Romanus tries to defend the kid. He points out that a man who renounces all worldly pleasures should be respected, not scorned.
Romanus actually gets a great dig in. He asks Peleus point blank, could you torment your overstuffed belly to live on roots and berries?
And Peleus just retreats into this defensive insecurity. He basically retorts, well, no, but I'm not a saint, and this fellow thinks he is.
This friction culminates in a scene that utilizes the audio medium so perfectly. It's this moment we could call the divine dinner interruption.
Oh, it's such a brilliant scene.
Right. Romanus goes out into the freezing wilderness to bring Benedict a meager scrap of food. And Romanus is trembling. He's babbling in shock about what just happened back at the monastery.
The contrast they paint is so vivid, because Romanus describes sitting at a banquet. The monastery is feasting in the warmth of their dining hall.
And right as he's enjoying this hearty meal, Romanus hears a voice. And the text emphasizes that he hears it most clearly, and it calls him by his specific name.
It's the voice of God.
Literally chiding him for stuffing himself in the twilight while his servant Benedict is starving out in the dark.
Romanus is terrified. He tells Benedict, I wasn't drunk, barely a drop of wine had touched my lips.
This divine intervention just totally shatters the complacency of the monastery. God is explicitly favoring the starving radical over the comfortable institution.
And this guilt trip from the divine pushes Romanus to make a really shocking proposal.
Right, because the abbot of the monastery has recently died.
Yes. The monks are fractured. They can't agree on a successor.
Yeah.
So, driven by this divine rebuke, Romanus suggests Benedict's name.
And the brothers, probably out of some mix of awe and deep guilt, actually approve it. They elect this feral 20-something hermit to be their new abbot.
Benedict immediately identifies the institutional absurdity of this, by the way.
Yeah, he pushes back hard.
He points out a massive logistical flaw in the text. He says, I'm not even an ordained priest.
He has no administrative experience, no formal theological training within their hierarchy whatsoever.
They're taking a guy who hasn't even gone through the basic onboarding process and making him the CEO.
But Romanus counters with a line that just cuts through all the red tape. He says, godliness is the only qualification we ask.
This is such a critical collision. We are witnessing an established institution attempting to harness Raw, charismatic authority.
They think that by just giving Benedict a title, they can absorb his spiritual power and kind of legitimize their own community.
But they wildly underestimate how disruptive true holiness actually is to a complacent system, because this promotion puts Benedict directly in the crosshairs of Brother Peleus.
Who is very much the leader of the opposition.
Yes. And the tense dialogue between Benedict and Peleus, when Benedict first arrives to take command, is incredible.
Peleus is a cornered political animal here, and he immediately sets a psychological trap for the new abbot.
He walks right up to Benedict and asks, "Would you say you are more pious than the rest of us?"
It is a brilliant trap, because if Benedict says yes, he commits the sin of pride, right? Which proves Peleus right, that he's just an arrogant ascetic looking down on everyone.
But if he says no, he undermines his own authority. It raises the question of why he should be leading them at all.
But Benedict's deflection is so brilliant, it completely bypasses that binary trap.
Peleus sneers at him, saying, "A pious face does not always reflect a pious heart."
And Benedict responds with this devastating, humble quietness. He says, "It is not piety you see in my face, Brother Peleus. It is mostly sorrow for my sins."
That response completely neutralizes the attack through radical humility.
He refuses to claim moral superiority. He claims a deeper, more agonizing awareness of his own brokenness.
It totally disarms Peleus's rhetorical strategy, but neutralizing the argument doesn't neutralize the hatred.
No, if anything, it accelerates it.
Right, because Peleus realizes he can't out-argue Benedict, so he moves to eliminate him.
Which brings us to the climax of this segment, the assassination attempt. Peleus invites Benedict to sit down, break bread, and he offers a toast to Benedict's quote-unquote long stay with them.
The irony is just dripping from that scene. He hands the new abbot a cup of laced wine.
And Benedict, adhering to the fundamental rhythms of his faith, pauses to ask a blessing over it.
And the words of the blessing are very specific in the script. He asks the Lord to bless the wine so that it may be a means of good health and protection of soul.
And then the physics of the room fundamentally alter.
Yes.
As Benedict makes the sign of the cross over the glass, it violently shatters into 100 pieces. The poison wine spills uselessly across the floor.
What's fascinating here is how the narrative frames this.
Right, it's not just a magic trick.
Exactly. It's not a convenient little force field saving the hero. It is framed as an ontological clash.
Oh, I like that. Expand on that.
The physical poison, which is designed to destroy life, literally cannot hold its molecular structure when subjected to the spiritual force of that blessing.
Wow.
The lower reality shatters in the presence of the higher reality.
And the psychological impact on Peleus is instant and absolute. The physical shattering of the glass completely shatters his mental defenses.
He drops to his knees, utterly terrified.
He calls it the face of God's wrath. And he immediately spews this full, pathetic confession. He admits his jealousy, his resentment, and his attempt to murder the abbot.
And here's where we see the true measure of Benedict's leadership. Think about the options available to a man in power who has just caught his rival in an assassination attempt, backed by a manifest miracle.
Yeah, he has all the cards. He could imprison Peleus.
He could launch an inquisition to purge the monastery of dissenters.
He could leverage this divine mandate to become an absolute tyrant.
Instead, his reaction is uniquely undramatic, almost bafflingly quiet.
He turns to Romanus and simply says, "I am not happy here. I am not satisfied I am serving God by remaining here. I've decided to leave."
He possesses the profound wisdom to walk away.
Okay, wait. I have to push back here.
Go ahead.
He just packs up and leaves. Doesn't that feel like a massive cop-out?
It does to a modern ear, sure.
The guy has genuine spiritual authority. God is literally shattering poisoned glasses for him, and his response is to abandon his post. Doesn't Peleus kind of win in this scenario? Like, if you have the power to fix a broken, toxic institution, isn't running away a failure of duty? Why is this framed as wisdom?
That is the natural modern reaction, exactly.
Yeah.
We view power as a tool for enforcing compliance.
Right.
If you have the power, you force the system to change.
Yeah.
But Benedict operates on a completely different paradigm of authority. He realizes that a spiritual community cannot be built on coercion or fear.
Okay, I see where you're going.
If he stays, sure, the monks might obey him because they're terrified his god will explode their dinnerware. But they won't be transformed. His mere presence is provoking murder, not holiness.
Wow. Yeah, he's bringing out the worst in them just by being there.
Exactly. True monastic leadership requires the willing submission of the community. If they fundamentally reject the radical nature of his calling, forcing them to comply is spiritually sterile.
So walking away isn't surrender, it is the establishment of a boundary.
Yes. He is refusing to waste his spiritual capital managing a toxic bureaucracy.
Okay, that reframes it completely. He refuses to become a warden. He just says to Romanes, come, we'll spend our last few hours together in prayer, and leaves at dawn.
He tries to return to a solitary life, aiming for obscurity.
But, as we were saying earlier, you can't just unring a bell of that magnitude. When you survive a poisoned assassination attempt by shattering the glass with a blessing, you tend to attract a crowd.
You really do. The gravitational pull of his authenticity has only increased.
So he marches south through the wilderness. But by noon, a massive crowd from the last village has tracked them into the wasteland.
And this introduces the phase of the reluctant guru. He can no longer exist in isolation. He can no longer just be a hermit.
The world is actively hunting him down for answers. So standing there in the brutal Mediterranean heat, he delivers this impromptu sermon.
And the core theology he presents here is vital to understanding his ultimate impact.
What strikes me is how unacademic it is in the text. He doesn't launch into a dense philosophical defense of the prime mover.
No, he starts with a very simple premise. He preaches that the reason for loving God is God himself.
Quoting the epistle of St. John that he has first loved us.
But then he turns directly to the unbelievers in the crowd, those he says have blinded themselves. And the evidence he provides for a loving God is deeply grounded in everyday human experience.
Let's break down the mechanics of his argument here. He points to the numberless benefits conferred upon mankind. He asks the crowd, who else supplies food to everyone who eats, light to everyone who sees, breath to everyone who breathes?
Bread, sun, and air.
It reminds me entirely of G.K. Chesterton's philosophy of gratitude.
Oh, absolutely.
Chesterton argued that we shouldn't just be thankful for extraordinary interventions. We should be staggered by the daily miracle that the sun rises, that our lungs process oxygen, that the earth yields wheat.
And Benedict is doing the exact same thing 14 centuries earlier.
He shrinks the massive, abstract concept of divine love down to the physiological sensation of drawing breath. If you are breathing, you are receiving a gift.
It is a theology of radical, ordinary awareness. He is teaching them that the sacred isn't just found in a church. It is woven into the very fabric of physical existence.
But this profound teaching immediately slams into a very harsh physical reality.
All right, because they are in the desert.
Yeah. Benedict prophesies that many in this crowd will become servants of Christ and will actually build a monastery right there on that spot.
Which prompts someone to point out a glaring logistical failure. There is no water here.
You can't build a community, let alone sustain agriculture, in a barren expanse of rock without a water source.
The Roman solution to this problem was engineering. You build a massive aqueduct, you bend nature to your will through state power and slave labor.
But Rome is gone, the aqueducts are crumbling.
So Benedict introduces a new paradigm. He says, through Christ, I will give you a sign. Behold, where there is no water, there is plenty.
And a fountain gushes directly from the barren rocks.
We have to recognize the deep typological layering happening here in the script. The writers of the radio drama are explicitly mirroring the Exodus narrative.
Right, Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt.
Moses striking the rock to provide water for a desperate people in the wilderness. Benedict has led these people out of the shadow of a decaying empire, and he is demonstrating that true sustenance comes from barren places when directed by faith.
Not imperial infrastructure.
Exactly.
The psychological impact on the crowd is total. They fall to their knees. And the text notes that this single moment led to the building of not just one, but many monasteries in the mountain country.
He is seeding the wilderness. He is creating a network of self-sustaining communities.
But his greatest challenge and his final destination still awaits him, near Naples.
And this is the pivot point. Up until now, Benedict has been operating in the empty spaces.
Right.
Building new things where nothing existed.
But when he arrives at Monte Cassino, he is forced to directly confront the remnants of the old world order.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yes. Benedict, accompanied by Pallius, who, by the way, has evidently repented and followed him, which is a fascinating little detail of redemption, they arrive at a mountain overlooking the sea.
And they find a beautiful, fully functioning pagan temple of Apollo sitting right on top of this prime real estate.
The clash of civilizations is literalized right here. You have the ancient, entrenched paganism of Rome occupying the high ground, and you have this ragged, ascetic monk walking up the path.
But they don't have long to admire the architecture, because they are immediately intercepted.
Enter Garius.
Garius, the keeper of the temple.
And he is not interested in theological debate. He is armed with a sword, and he is backed by 50 heavily armed soldiers.
Garius is the embodiment of the Roman coercive state. His authority rests entirely on the threat of physical violence.
And the dialogue in this scene is incredibly snappy, almost bordering on dark comedy.
It really is. Garius casually threatens to cut Benedict's neck.
Benedict barely reacts, so Garius escalates. He tells Benedict he is going to forcefully convert him to Apollo, noting conversationally, "We could start out by roasting your feet. That usually does the trick."
Roasting his feet. And when Benedict calmly suggests it would be simpler for Garius to convert to Christ, Garius just laughs at the audacity.
He explains they have special entertainment for Christians. "We generally drop you into a snake pit and watch you squirm."
He claims it amuses him, and it amuses his god, Apollo.
Picture the staging of this confrontation. You have 50 soldiers gripping their swords, a sneering temple guard threatening torture by fire and venom, and one unarmed monk in a habit.
The physical power disparity is absolute, but Benedict's reaction fundamentally rewrites the rules of engagement.
He doesn't flinch.
He doesn't call down angels with flaming swords. He calmly evaluates the theology of Garius's threat. He replies, "A very cruel god, wouldn't you say?" He has a sense of humor.
And then, standing entirely within the crosshairs of imperial violence, Benedict pronounces a verdict. He says calmly that the idol shouldn't be standing there, and a better use can be found for the land.
And then the spiritual demolition happens.
Yeah, but it isn't a physical fight. Benedict doesn't signal an army of monks to attack.
The narrative describes the event with stunning simplicity. Without a physical blow being struck, by the sheer power of the Christian God demonstrated through mortal man, the Temple of Apollo simply collapses.
And the statue crumbles to dust.
Just like the poisoned glass, the illusion simply cannot hold its shape in reality when confronted by absolute truth.
And the psychological fallout is immediate. The 50 armed soldiers, men trained to kill, men who just seconds ago were ready to roast a man alive, watch their invincible stone temple dissolve into powder, and they flee in absolute terror.
The physical threat of the sword is rendered entirely impotent.
And Garius, the man who was chuckling about snake pits, instantly drops to his knees in conversion.
Which is such an important point of analysis here. Benedict doesn't conquer with an army. He conquers by presenting a spiritual reality so overwhelming that the old pagan structures literally cannot stand its presence.
With the old gods cleared away, Benedict is finally ready to build the foundation that will survive the next 14 centuries.
The immediate aftermath shows his brilliance as an administrator, too.
Right, because he doesn't just rest on the miracle. He tells Garius to build 2 chapels on the site.
And he specifies the dedications. One to St. Martin, the other to St. John the Baptist.
Which recodes the DNA of the mountain from a place of exploitation, cruelty, Apollo to charity and asceticism.
Exactly. And then Benedict officially names the place Monte Cassino.
The broadcast notes he stays there for 14 years.
Closing the loop on our whole discussion today, this is the founding moment we were talking about at the very beginning. This is the origin of the father of Western monasticism.
This is the seed that was planted, which Lombards, Saracens, Napoleon, and WWII bombs could not permanently destroy.
Because he established a rhythm of life, ora et labora, prayer and work, that was more durable than any stone wall.
Synthesizing this incredible journey we've been on through this script, it's just amazing.
It really is an incredible arc.
You go from a wild, terrified young man eating roots in a cave to a reluctant leader surviving poisoning by his own brothers.
To a miracle worker shattering pagan temples without lifting a finger.
To the architect of a resilient civilization.
And the real takeaway for you, listening to this, is that real enduring power often doesn't look like 50 soldiers with swords.
Sometimes it looks like a solitary figure willing to bless a poison cup and calmly walk away to build something better.
Which brings us to the final thought we want to leave you with.
Right. Think about this. Benedict fled the world because he thought it was completely wicked and unsalvageable.
He ran away.
Yet, by running away to live in a cave, he ended up creating the exact blueprint that would save that very world. So what is something in your own life that you might need to step entirely away from in order to figure out how to truly fix it?
It's a profound question to ponder.
It really is. Until next time.